Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to some. Welcome to the Beehive. Today, we are going to be having our part 3 of a set of workshops that we're really working around Slate and doing a lot of different things. The thing that we're going to be talking about today is engagement and the concept and the strategies of engagement scoring. And so today I have David Dysart here. He's been our resident expert and has been guiding us in all of the things around Slate, but also around admissions and applying it. So whether we're talking about it Slate today, it could be done in so many different ways in different admissions platforms. So I wanted to make sure that was really known. Before we start, I just like to do some housekeeping. One, I'd like to say thank you for joining us. As you know, the Beehive is a very interactive place. So in the comments and places, go ahead and tell us what you're thinking. Tell us where you're from. Give us some hellos. You can then also, while we're being engaged, join us on the stage. So if you want to join us, just to let us know in the chat. We'll bring you up. We have folks that will drive a conversation here. We will also allow you to just come on the stage if in terms of, hey, this is a good conversation, we'll bring you on. Today is going to be a deeper dive into it. It's what David does really well, and a lot of people have been asking for us. So hopefully we will have a good combination of that. So David, let's go, and we'll take it from here. So David, before we really start into what you're going to showcase in how to actually do engagement scoring, I think the first conversation I'd like to maybe have is, what does it mean to be engaged with a student? Like, can we define engagement? What do you define as engagement? Because in order for us to score it, we kind of have to have a little bit of definition around it. What is that?
Yeah, so for this conversation, we'll be primarily talking about how Slate can track things and how an admission office will kind of measure or view engagement. Some institutions call it demonstrated interest, whatever it might be that your institution uses to really see how the student is interacting with your campus or your student body or your alumni and parents, it could be even. So any time that these constituents are interacting with your campus, could be sending an email, could be coming to an event, could be visiting your website or tracking it through like a ping in Slate or something along those lines. So it's really just being able to gauge how how interested the student is and how engaged, how much they're interacting with your staff and your virtual experiences.
So, I'm an old school guy. I was around in the 90s when there wasn't a lot of computers. So I used to go to fairs, and even though I was in part of the registrar's office, I was asked to go because I was a little personal, and I was able to chat with people. Engagement has really changed from the 90s till now, right? It's much more social. Has different tentacles. When we were going, it was really about engaging with people in a one-on-one conversation. What are the changes around engagement that has moved from the 90s to now? Can you give it a little bit of that context? Because I think that would help us also understand we have to tackle engagement strategy slightly different than what we've done in the past. And the reason I kind of want to go through this conversation is I don't want anyone to take what you're going to be showcasing and just layering it over. I kind of want them to rethink their strategy. Like that's one of my goals I would love to hear you think about and talk about. So what has changed in terms of engagement in the past decades, and why is this time really important for us to think about it differently?
Yeah, and I feel like there is so much of that person interaction, whether it's your staff going out to do school visits and college fairs and having these really meaningful conversations with high school students, transfer students, veterans, whatever your groups are. That is such a huge element to the admission process. But the kind of development of technology, whether it's websites, virtual communications. There's so much more that you can offer students to meet them where they are on their schedule, where they are living at, and also tracking it. So maybe 30 years ago, you didn't have a system that could say like, oh yeah, this student was on our financial aid page for 45 minutes, and then they went to their student accounts and they went to this web page. So you're able to really start building a really deep understanding of how your students are engaging with you, what their needs are. And things like engagement scoring allows you to understand your students better and tailor how you're doing outreach, how you're doing your recruitment, how you're actually evaluating your applications. So it really is just an enablement over this last several decades of how institutions can offer interactions and how they can actually track those interactions to understand those students better.
Yeah, I appreciate you kind of just giving us that perspective, because I think that's really important. Now, I'm a big believer we got to move from transactional strategy, where we're just doing things to do things, and become a little bit more transformational in our strategy because of all of these new things that are in front of us. The way that students engage in their daily lives, the access to mobile, the ability for their attention span to be less than 12 minutes, right? All these things that we know that YouTube and everyone else is taking into consideration. We kind of have to do that in terms of it. And then the other thing that I think has really changed from when I was doing this is we just kind of followed the same playbook, and we just went. We went to the schools, we went to the fairs, we had tours that came in. There was no strategy. We didn't even realize who was more interested than others. We didn't have that. And I think this is an opportunity for us to really take a different look at that and then drive that conversation. So yeah, you were gonna say something?
No, yeah, I was just going to comment. Like, I feel like the shift over the last few years to a very technology forward has also enabled us to be more accessible as institutions. So now, not everyone was ever going to come to campus for a campus tour, but now there's been more of a shift of, well, let's offer those virtual student experiences, whether that's through a Slate portal or some other services or vendors that allows us to engage with students, but also this like, oh, these are our populations that are engaging with these services more. So let's highlight these to this particular group of students, because that's just what serves them better.
So, and folks, as we are having this conversation, definitely in the comments, if you have a question for David, certainly chime in. I appreciate all the folks. We're from all over the country. I'm in Miami. David is in LA. We're stretched across the country, and I see a lot of people in between. So that's really good. And I see Freddie is way in the Dominican Republic. So really, can you explain what engagement scoring is and how does it help a campus? Because I think having that understanding, and what role does it play and where does it play in a campus?
Yeah, so we're focusing on engagement scoring in these last three workshops, and coming up, we're going to do predictive modeling in Slate. And both of those tools are great ways to contextualize the student. So you can, and we'll go over this a bit more later in the workshop, but understanding the student through application review, or understanding in a more strategic sense, how can we build our recruitment to target students that are going to have the best impact from college fairs, school visits, whatever it might be that we're able to do those kinds of outreach to. Because we don't want to have 7 college fairs that no one shows up to. So we're starting to understand our prospective student population better and able to target our outreach. And same thing with emails and marketing communications, or just the human work of making phone calls, sending out postcards, that those very time intensive outreach pieces that you're not going to be able to do for 100,000 prospects in your database, but you can do it for a smaller group that are going to benefit from it.
So I'm going to push back a little bit. As soon as you say that a human is about to go do a phone call and push out an email, the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, David, we got to get them to everything like that to be automated, right? We're in the conversations, and you're inside of these at Beyond, where we're starting to even look at how does AI communicate with our prospects, with our students using that technology? So I would love to use engagement scoring in a way to hit the interactions with a student where the structured stuff, the things that have just basic rules, the basics of what I say. I would love to be able to use that and then use AI on top of it, and then to be really strategic. Why? Because I want to create more capacity for humans to do human work. I think that's the number one goal. So while we think about the strategy in engagement scoring, if I'm just going to go do what humans do really well today in terms of email and so forth, we're not going to take advantage of what AI and the next generation of technologies is going to be there for us. So I am going to say, hey, let's have that in the back of our mind as we go through this conversation. So
yeah, and we're definitely going to go through some examples of having automatic emails triggered by the actual engagement score. So we're sending those emails or Slate print, whether that's a view book or they're like robot-ridden postcards, whatever it might be. So those, again, are just going to be automatically sent to those students who we know are engaged. We just need a little extra nudge to push them over the we're going to apply, we're going to enroll piece. But also being able to be more strategic with, like you said, that human time of like, we don't want staff like, oh, I felt like these 3 students from Denver, I can probably give them a call and push them over the edge. It's like, well, no, you don't have to dig through your prospective student pile. Slate's going to be able to offer you those lists or those groups of students that are going to benefit the most from that outreach. And we get much more into it when we get into predictive modeling in the next couple of months of being able to segment out your different personas, and like this is the kind of outreaches that's going to help these students the best.
Great. Well, I know most people want to hear you talk, so I'm gonna defer this to you now and take us on the journey around the strategies around enrollment, engagement scoring, and I'll always chime in as you go through that process. So it's all yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate the conversation up top. And like Matt says, we can bring folks on stage or we can answer questions as we go along. That's one of the things I love about StreamYard is it gives us a much more interactive session than a recorded webinar that just kind of blankly goes out to everybody. So let's go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen. Okay, so yes, this is our series. This is the last one on engagement scoring. We'll move on to predictive modeling in the coming months. So my name is David. I am the Director of Data and Functional Systems here at Beyond Academics. I've worked at institutional research and Office of Admission at large public institutions and small liberal arts colleges, respectively. I've also spent a bit of time outside of higher education, but I am so happy to have refound my home here in higher ed, and especially happy to be here with everybody today. Beyond Academics serves as an operating partner to institutions committed to and becoming and remaining future ready. Today, we'll have 3 broad topics we're going to be talking about. Collaboration in the office. And I think this is really important as you're building your score and as you're talking through how to use the score internally as an office. And we're just using Slate's architecture to continue that work. But we're also going to be talking about how to use Slate tools like translation codes to actually create a score that your staff can use. You can tell your staff members like, oh yes, this student's a 56, but what does that mean to them? And what does that mean for the student? So being able to create a useful tool is so important when everyone's being flooded with data and everyone has all these numbers being thrown at them that they don't know what it means or what to do with. So that's also a really important aspect of this engagement scoring process is delivering a good tool that is useful. And then lastly, we're going to spend most of the time today on how to actually strategically use your engagement score in your business processes. And we've already done a lot of the technical work in our previous workshops on how to build your configurable joins, how to actually build your score. So yeah, we're going to really focus more on the strategy piece here today. Let me see if I can move that sharing my screen piece there. So we'll probably be talking about for the next 40-ish minutes these topics. And so let's dive right into it. Collaboration is going to be our first topic. And we're going to be using Slate, whether that's forms, deliver, portals, to collaborate with our staff members. Could be your admission officers, could be your advisors, whoever your team is that has that institutional knowledge and will actually be your functional users after the tool is built. Because if you're getting the buy-in from these staff at this point, and we'll go ahead and hop over to Slate. And this is just this form that we've built up. So you're getting that buy-in and that engagement from your staff members at the very early stages of this process. That way, they're being able to share their institutional knowledge. They are providing insights to how to build this tool. They'll be much more likely to use the tool afterwards. And as much as we have historical data as a framework to build our score, there's so much knowledge and data in the heads of your staff members that are going to provide insights to the tool, how to use it, how to score it, what behaviors to add. So this is just such a crucial element to both build and use the score. And we can see here, we're going to tie this actual form response to your staff member. And that could be as a data set in Slate. It could be as a regular person record that we're marking specifically as a staff member. And this really helps in a lot of downstream effects as well, of assigning tasks and duties, or emailing folks reports, or building a campus staff portal. So we do want to get information on like, what do they view as a demonstrated interest or an engaged student? What red flags could we incorporate? Because we could be adding like 5 points for events and 7 points for emails. But if they no-showed 17 events, that's going to be something that you as the builder of the tool might not have thought about, to like, maybe we need to add some negative points to accommodate these really red flag behaviors, or maybe they came into the campus and yelled at your staff members. These are all important pieces that, like, oh yes, they scored an 85 points, but they're obviously not going to be conducive in person on the environment. So understanding the evaluation process is really going to help you understand how to build this profile. And we also want to understand how to pick our behaviors, score our behaviors. And I typically like having like a 100-point maximum for an engagement score like this. So there's not so like, oh, this person got 250 points and this person got 30 points. That 100-point ceiling does offer a bit of context. So understanding how many points per behavior, and also how many points they should be able to get as a maximum. If someone went to 20 events, that might give them 100 points. But realistically, someone coming to 20 events isn't going to be 20 times more engaged. So understanding,
David, David, when you think about the scoring itself, do you use historical data to come up with the scoring points for the future? Meaning, can you look at trends that did really well, or engagement, aspects? Could you use that to build a scoring model? What's been your approach on that?
Yeah, I typically use a program like Excel to gather all my data. So again, we're building our data exports through configurable joins. We're taking that historical data. We're looking at the kind of behaviors that we're tracking in Slate. We might be transforming how we're coding those behaviors. And we're seeing how those behaviors contribute to an outcome. Maybe you have a staff evaluation of engagement or demonstrated interest, or you're validating against if the student applied or if the student enrolled. And in our last workshop, we kind of did correlations to see, okay, how is our individual behaviors and how is our total new automated score correlating with these outcomes, whether it's an evaluation or application. And this element of engaging your staff is just kind of more of a starter point of like, oh, okay, this is how our staff view engagement at our institution. And it might be one of those things that, like, oh yeah, students who come to campus in Northern Alaska, very engaged. They really want to come here, versus someone who's like, oh yeah, it's a college in LA. They were here on summer vacation and decided to pop by. So they're going to have a lot of institutional knowledge to understand what an engaged student is. And this just helps kind of, as a starting point, understand at your institution what some of these markers might be. And understanding like, oh, maybe we need multiple scoring rubrics for a prospect versus an inquiry versus an applicant versus an admitted student, because it might be different behaviors. I know when we're doing predictive modeling, it's a very different model to predict how likely someone is to apply versus how likely someone is to enroll. You have more data points the later in the system, the later in the cycle you get, you have more opportunities. So there is definite value here for your institution possibly. And then Slate's also just going to, if they want to meet with the staff member building this, whether it's a vendor, whether it's your Slate captain, this form will just trigger an automatic email to all the staff involved saying, okay, let's set up an appointment. And the other piece of this is also keeping your staff informed and updated. So I like using a Slate Deliver. And it's just going to go to your institutional staff members. And it can have things like links to your Slate form, which again will be tied with like a person GUID or your data set record ID. So we know like, oh, okay, this is staff member 3 responding a second time, or this is our director answering the form this time. And they don't have to like enter their name or an ID or anything to tie to their record. But one of the things I really like about having a Slate Deliver is I'm able to pull the data from our form. So as the staff members are completing that form, I'm able to display in Slate like, oh, staff on average say an in-person event should be worth 10 points. And then in parentheses, I'm telling the staff member, well, this is what you said on the form. And so they're understanding how their perspective relates to the office averages. And again, on average, folks said that the maximum number of points an in-person event should count for is about 47 points. You said 75 points. And we're able to do that with the magic of configurable joins, a wonderful tool. And we're able to, we have our recipient list base set to our staff members, but we're able to actually run an entirely separate independent subquery or just a completely new data extract to aggregate the averages of these form responses. So you're able to pull in a lot of interesting data through Slate tools that you wouldn't be able to otherwise if you were just sending a static email to your 7 staff members to update them about the process. So as an addition to this, you could start building a lot of this into a staff portal as well. You can highlight like, oh, okay, we need another round of responses. So I'm going to take up the prominent real estate at the top of the portal, maybe with a content block or some date widgets to say, okay, we need your responses again. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to go over actually using the score. So we're not going to demonstrate the portal today. So we're going to pop back over to our PowerPoint. I want to talk about Slate optimization now. And like I said earlier, you can tell your staff like, oh, okay, this person is a 36. But what does a 36 actually mean in the context of your prospective student population? And what does a 36 mean at March versus 2 weeks before your application deadline? So what we're really going to want to do is provide a translation code. So this is going to take that raw data, a 36 out of 100, 85 out of 100, and we're going to display to them a translated value. Any score from a 0 to a 19.5 is going to give you these different values. And I'm going to just pop up into the notes. So perhaps your staff evaluate applications on a 1 to 5 scale. So when they look at a number, that's just what's going to be most helpful for them is a 1 through 5. So you're able to translate like, oh, 55 equals a 4 out of 5. Or maybe it just means a high engagement versus a low or a medium. And these last 2 export values are quintiles and percentiles. And then we can hop over to Excel here. And it's really easy to update these translation codes by uploading an Excel document. So what I typically do is I just export your Slate data, so your applicant pool, your prospective student pool, whatever group of students or records you're interested in. And then I just have formulas based off of those percentiles, which is actually feeding off of our export values. So what are the values between 0 and your bottom 20th percentile? and that's a 9.4. And again, this is going to be different in March versus October. So you're able to keep Slate updated with accurate scoring bands throughout the year in 5 minutes. You have a query built, you download it, you drop it into this Excel template, you upload the Excel template into Slate, and it updates your translation codes here. So maybe in March, it wasn't 51.8, it was 25.7 in this score band. So your staff members are always going to have the most up-to-date, most useful score in front of them. And I wanted to spotlight a colleague and what they did with this engagement score. So what they did was they actually built a dashboard, and this is Paloma. I don't know if Paloma is on the webinar or the call today, but fantastic Slate captain at UCR. And what she did was she built a student dashboard in the dashboard tab that displayed the demonstrated interest. You had the raw score of 14 out of 100, not always what's the most helpful display of the data, but then she displayed it in stars. And again, she used that translation code of a 1 through 5 to drive a 3 out of 5 stars. So the staff member, whether that's an admission counselor, your front of office, your student workers, are able to see that this is a moderately highly engaged student. And whether that's they're going in for an interview or they're going in to work with the student in some capacity, or if this is an office of advancement or student success, you're understanding how the student is engaging with your institution. And one of the things we highlighted in the last workshop is you can have multiple scores. You can have a academic engagement score, you can have an event engagement score, you can have a communication engagement score. So you're not only seeing one score for a student, you can have these different contextual personas, how you're scoring them. And then she also has a likelihood to apply and a likelihood to enroll. That just changes. If you haven't applied yet, it tells you how likely the student is to apply. If you haven't enrolled yet, it tells you how likely the student is to enroll at the institution. So again, you're using these embedded, easy to use Slate tools to make the engagement score itself much more useful, much more accessible for your staff to make an impact with it. So like I said, most of our time today is going to be on how to actually use this score in your instance of Slate and your admission office. So we'll just hop back over to Slate here. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is application review. And again, we want to contextualize the student through this engagement score. Or if you're building a similar type of score for something else, you can highlight it on your application review process, or if you have a review process for a fly-in program, whatever it might be that helps you understand the student at a glance. And we're going to talk through 3 options, and you can see these here. So you can add this automated score as a read-only field. So we can see we have a text box field. We're tying it to the demonstrated interest or engagement score field, but it is a read-only because if staff decided like, oh no, it's not an 86, they're a 75. Well, Slate is automatically refreshing the score maybe every day, every week, however often your institution decides to do it. So if they update the score here, Slate's just going to refresh it with the 85 again tomorrow. But again, it adds that context to the student, to your staff member. And this is kind of the easy, fast way to add the data. Another option is you can start embedding these as merge fields. So in an instructional piece score, you can do your translation codes. And we pop over here to edit properties. We can see we're joining from the form response to the application. We're joining the application to the person because the person data table is where this engagement score lives. So we have the raw value. We have a translated version of it, so we can choose our translation code. We can choose the actual key that we're using. And export to just goes back to this export 1 through 5. You could be doing high, low, medium, you could do percentiles, whatever's going to be the most helpful for your staff during that evaluation process. And the last option, which is the more advanced version, is if your staff does an evaluation of engagement or demonstrated interest, you can map that system field to your staff evaluation, and you can just pre-fill it with your automated score. So again, we're doing our joins to the proper data table, and we're doing a 1 through 5 translation because that's how the staff evaluates engagement. And this allows the staff to like, oh, okay, yeah, there are 4 out of 5. I agree with the automated score, and they can move on. Or if there's like, no, I had a 2-hour phone call conversation with a student. We talked about their hopes and dreams and how our institution fits it. This person's a 5 out of 5, no doubt. So then they are able to update that review field without updating the actual automated score. But we're giving them the opportunity to understand the student, and if that evaluation is correct, they don't have to spend time filling it out. And one piece that goes along with this could be staff training. A lot of, whether you're training a new reader or a part-time reader and you're giving them older records to evaluate to see how they do, you're able to maybe open them up into new students a little bit earlier because you're contextualizing these students based on an agreed upon rubric that is automatically scoring the student for something like engagement. So it also helps with training staff. So the next element of using an engagement score is we're going to talk about those automated email, whether it's an email campaign or a standalone deliver. We can have Slate send an email specifically to maybe highly engaged students. And we're able to tailor that email as well. So maybe we want to send an email to everyone that is moderately to highly engaged. So that's what we're doing with our filter there. And then we want to send maybe a longer, more detailed email or a different call to action or a more time-intensive call to action to the students who are extremely highly engaged. So maybe like we just wanted to touch base with everyone who's kind of a warm applicant, but we know the students who are really engaged with us are going to read a longer email, or they're going to take a more intense call to action. So you're able to actually start adding conditional logic. You can just, again, in Slate's pretty easy. It's a kind of click and drag user interface of like, oh yeah, the people who are really engaged, maybe greater than or equal to an 80 out of 100. I want to send sorry about that. I think I broke my email there for a second. We want to send that longer email to those students. And for this particular call to action, we're using a dynamic piece of content block. So we're going to look at if the student visited us on a tour or had a virtual event or did an interview with us, we want to have a longer piece of text to promote those events. So in our recipient list, we just have this event attendance export. So this is just looking at if they came to a tour, give us a yes, no, or a 1-0. And it builds a 3-digit value of yes, they went to a tour or no, yes, they went to a virtual event or no, or yes or no for the interview. So what you end up getting is this 3-digit code here. So this particular student has not gone to a tour camp, has not gone to campus for an event, has not done a virtual event, or has not done an interview. So we're giving them this longer call to action of like, very detailed, like, oh, okay, this is the pitch to get them to come visit us. This is the pitch to do a virtual event. This is the pitch to do an interview. You don't want to have this complicated of a call to action to everyone, but you know your very engaged students might be more inclined to a longer email. But it's dynamic. So also this next person here, they've gone to a tour, they've done a virtual event, but they haven't done an interview. So the text they get is just that pitch for doing an interview. And we're building this out. So again, I'm color coordinating this just for the workshop. But if they haven't done anything, they get that longer paragraph. If they've done an interview, we're only talking about virtual events in interviews. If they've done, again, those first 2 types of events, it's just talking about interviews. So we're able to start crafting a more personalized email to them just based on if they're going to be more receptive to a longer email through an engagement score, but also tailoring it based on their data. Are they coming to an event? Is there another call to action? We can have a little button here at the bottom that's like, oh, if you haven't applied, it's an apply now button. Or if you haven't gone to an event, it's a link to our visit portal. So you're able to not only automate your emails, but you're also able to dynamically tailor your emails based on your student data. And engagement scoring is just a helpful piece to inform how much you can tailor this information.
So David, one of the things, I'm a big fan of Slate, but one of the things that I've noticed, like I said, I see it from my daughter who's gone through the process of being recruited and engaged with. There's a lot of what I call templated interactions, and our students know it's templated. How do we not look so templated? Because you're saying to a student, I want to be so engaged with you, I want to be personal, I want to do this, and then we give them this like automated templated email that it has no like personalization other than the elements that you're kind of putting in there. Any strategies around that? Because I don't know if schools realize it, but that actually is hurting them from being personal, right? Being personalized, because they're connecting in that way with the student without realizing that they do actually look like and know that it's templated communication. I get tons of emails, and as soon as I think it's canned, it's going in the trash, or I don't move. I don't do any call to action at that moment in time, because I know that there is no relationship that email has connected with me. Any thoughts on that as you think about engagement scoring and how to make it a little bit more less templated?
Yeah, and a lot of this is going to be based on how much data you have in Slate. So three good sources of data that I can think of is ping data. So again, if they're spending 45 minutes on your financial aid website, or they're spending 30 minutes on your athletics page, or they're spending 20 minutes on your art major, as long as you're recording that information, you can build a single dynamic email that goes out to either everyone or, again, that subset of students who like, oh, okay, we're going to use content blocks. So if they're either an art major or they're spending time on our art page, we're able to craft a more genuine narrative about the art program on campus or our art faculty or that student experience that they're going to get based on what they appear to be interested on through whether that's exploring the website. One of the things I did while I was still on the institution side is I built a kind of a 2-page inquiry form. So like the first one just had the 5 major questions, like the name, birth date, email, stuff like that. And then it did an automatic redirect to a much longer inquiry form that allowed them to like, oh, I'm interested in faculty, or I'm interested in the weather, or I'm interested in these different bucketed interest groups. And then got much more granular. And then built a deliver campaign based specifically on, oh, you plan on going to grad school, you care about academics, and you want to go into STEM. So we're able to craft an email that is very specific to that student persona that doesn't require you typing an email to that student. It doesn't require you building an email to everyone that looks like a generic STEM email. But you're able to craft a narrative for that student journey that might seem very genuine or very hand-tailored. And other vendors are providing similar data on like neighborhoods based on zip code or high school. Again, that is just like, okay, the student from this zip code is probably interested in going out of state. They're probably interested in financial aid. So again, you can send an email to your 30 prospective students from that geography that matches that persona. And maybe it is really interesting for 25 out of that 30. And it's just like, oh, I did not get an email based on these 3 really targeted data points from any other institution. And maybe, like, again, the 5 people it didn't account for, it just looked like a generic email that any institution sent. But the 25 that got that email that really spoke to them, that's meaningful work.
So this is why I really believe that if you were to take time and design a strategy, because right now we just are spraying stuff and hoping it's going to stick, right? And I'd love to hear from any of the folks in the audience, in the listening lounge, what are they doing to make it personalized, right? It's a really important conversation I think needs to be had. So I really would love to recommend that schools are putting strategy in this, even though it may take a little bit longer, even though the algorithm may take a little bit longer to build. I think the ability to do that and say, hey, I saw you visit our site, our website yesterday morning for 20 minutes. The fact that you can say that, I think students would appreciate the fact that you even recognize it's there. Now, I know that there's granularity to that. You got to get the data. You got all that has to play. But man, I think it would play a really valuable role in feeling engaged with that student as they go forward. So, yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Wanted to...
And I have a little piece of text here in this email that just says, thanks for connecting with us during, and it actually looks at what was the last time you sent an email to us? And it counts the number of days. And then I'm just using a translation code to, oh, that's not it. So I'm using export formula here. What's the number of days, date diff, number of days that that's created? Yeah, this is a test environment. So I use person created, but you could do, what was the difference between the last email you sent us? Again, external email, student email was used. What was the last time you sent us an email? And what's today's date that we're sending this email? So if it was 3 days ago, we can say, oh, thanks for emailing us this week, or thanks for emailing us last week or last month. And again, when you're engaging with an institution and they're able to throw these little pieces in of like, oh, I did send them an email 3 days ago. That's amazing they remembered, and wow. And again, it's a fine line of being like, oh, we don't want to be creepy that we're like tracking your internet usage, but understanding like, oh, okay, yeah, I did email them. They're recognizing that this is me. They remember me. And being able to craft an email automatically that feels like it has so much human touch is really important because, like you said, Matt, everyone's sending emails. Everything feels like an automated template, and it's very disengaging to get those kinds of emails. So there is a lot that we can do in Slate or whatever your system of use is, that if you're tracking the information and you have, I mean, it takes some technical knowledge to be able to write essentially a SQL formula and understand like, oh yeah, I know how to pull the date the last email was sent to us. So it does require some technical work, and it does require time building out, whether that's that messaging strategy of major versus financial aid versus going out of state versus how far the student is from our institution. It does take time and it does take effort. And if you don't have a marketing team, Slate has their first draft feature, which allows you to give them a prompt and like, write me an email that you would send to an art student who's interested in financial aid. And it will start building out that email for you, and you can start dissecting it like, oh, okay, I would change this part to be more institution specific. We have a really awesome faculty member. We'll drop a video for them here. But if you are putting in the time, you're just going to stand out so much compared to whether it's competitor institutions or just higher education in general, or non-higher education companies that are doing similar things, whether it's certificates or other kind of learning platforms. So you're able to really, if you spend the time up front and you have enough technical knowledge to build these kinds of segmentations out, you do really stand out from the crowd. And then I know we're getting shorter on time, but I want to make sure we do cover a few more things. So again, we have this engagement score, so we're able to start prioritizing these high touch, high cost interventions. Maybe we want to call the people who are extremely high engagement, or we want to send a personalized postcard. Again, this could be staff like, oh, I have a 17-word window. I'll type that in real quick. Slate Print will send it out to the student. Or I want to grab a physical postcard and I want to write in and I want to send that postcard out. So you're able to start segmenting your student population. And again, maybe like, oh, everyone who is moderately to very engaged, I want to send a view book out. Again, these are expensive, time-consuming processes. You don't have time to call 100,000 people. You don't have the money to send 100,000 view books out. But you're able to start understanding your students and who are going to benefit from this, and who is going to become, who is this going to push over the edge to apply, to enroll, to matriculate. And it's all sources that you have. And then I also wanted to talk about recruitment travel. Not every institution is going to be doing recruitment travel, but if your institution is doing college fairs or going to school visits or hosting interviews on their road, you want to make sure that you're able to have an impact on the students that you're visiting. So if you're just sitting in 3 empty rooms, maybe that's not the location to go to. Maybe you can start understanding the institution level where to go, but you can also start understanding at the student level, where are our pockets of students that are going to be engaged with us. And maybe we host a college fair in Riverside, but maybe it makes more sense to host it in Ontario. We're getting these larger groups of highly engaged students here. Maybe they will, if it's closer to them, maybe it's in Pomona, maybe it's in Claremont, we can start getting that pool of students who are more engaged with us, who maybe didn't want to drive to Riverside, but they'll go closer. So maybe this is 2 visits now, or maybe it's a visit that's closer to our larger population center of students who are engaged with you or are more likely to apply. And this is a very simple Voyager. It just has our demonstrated interest, our engagement score, the translation, a likelihood to apply, and a zip code to actually do the overlay. But you're able to start crafting a strategic travel calendar that allows you to get to the students who are going to benefit from your visit. Maybe you're hosting case studies here. Maybe you're doing other pieces of outreach to this population. And like we have up here in Crestline, up the mountain, like that's a huge group of students that we just wouldn't have gone to because it's out of the way. But maybe if we can't go in person, we do some kind of virtual event for these particular students that craft that personal touch while being able to use the resources as the resources are diminishing. That's not a secret to anybody on the call. And then one last quick piece is, again, this is a less visual view of it, but understanding our feeder schools. And we're looking at a handful of schools here, how many prospective records we have, how many of those folks are applying, how many are matriculating, what their engagement score is, how likely, based on our predictive modeling, they were to apply. So we have this university up here. They seem pretty engaged. They have a pretty solid likelihood to apply, but we're not getting students. And maybe we're visiting this high school or this college every year, and it's just not happening. And we either need to look at what we're doing there or how we're spending our resources to better serve our prospective student population. And at the second row here, we have a solid amount of records, a ton of applicants, a ton of matriculants, very low engagement scores. So it doesn't look like they should be applying. And again, they definitely not that many people should be applying based on our model. So what is happening at this institution that is letting them be such a strong feeder school? Is it a very similar culture, campus culture? Do we have a great connection with our high school counselors there? Is there a CBO nearby that we actively work with? Whatever the secret sauce for this institution is, maybe there's a school next door, or maybe there's a school with a very similar culture in a different state that we've just never been on our radar that we could have a lot of success with. So understanding what's happening here at this institution, what's in this relationship, and how we can leverage it at other institutions. And again, we're seeing like, oh, okay, pretty solid funnel. This is about what we expected. They're not very engaged, reasonable likelihood to apply that matches how many people are actually applying. And then we have schools like this, again, very reasonable funnel, really highly engaged. They're maybe visiting all of our virtual events. Maybe they're emailing us 20 times. Maybe they're on their website all the time, but they're not really applying though. So there's some untapped potential at schools like this that they love us, they're really engaged with us, but something's just happening. Maybe the financial aid's not right. Maybe we're just not visiting that school to really get these students to apply to us. So you're able to start understanding the institutions and the students within the institutions and how you can leverage those relationships to just have a stronger funnel with these schools. I think that's about what I wanted to cover. So let's hop back to the PowerPoint. So yeah, we were able to use a collaboration framework in Slate to not only build our engagement score, but we're also engaging our staff members to find out what the institution-specific engagement score could look like. They're bought into the process early, so once you have an engagement score, they're going to be more likely to use it. Hey, Matt, you wanna? Okay.
I didn't say anything.
So we're optimizing that score. Again, it's just not a random number. It's not a 56. It's not a 275. It's a this student is at 3 out of 5 stars of engagement, or they're highly engaged, or they're in the top 80th percentile of engagement. However, your staff are going to be able to use this information, we're going to display it that is impactful and it's meaningful to them. And then there's so many uses for these scores, whether it's to drive your communications that you deliver, SMS text messages, maybe help navigate what your recruitment travel could look like, help leverage your existing or new relationships with institutions, or even using it in application review and in training. So there's just so many possible uses for the score. I tried to cram as much as I could in a 45-minute workshop. I'd be very happy to go more into depth with the configurable joins and the reports. We have 2 office hours every month that we host, and so definitely feel free to come to those. We have a QR code to sign up for the office hours, future workshops. And just like I said, this was the last workshop on automated engagement scoring. The next couple of months, we're going to get into predictive modeling. So next month, very similar framework of how to use a predictive model in Slate. And then we're going to get into the much more technical pieces in September and October. So if you have folks from institutional research or faculty who are trained in statistics, those would be great sessions for them to hop in with you and just kind of learn a little bit more of what's possible in Slate and how you can be using these kinds of tools. Like a lot of vendors, they're going to take the data, they're going to run it through their black box model, they're going to send you a number back. The process we're going to build over the next couple of months is we're going to build the model, but we're going to program that model math into Slate. So that's just going to continue running in perpetuity for as long as you have it. And of course, updated every year, but it's a very self-empowered version of predictive modeling that we're going to be going over. And then our conference in mid-November, we're hosting Beyond the Summit, a virtual Slate conference, very similar to the Slate stage that Technolutions used to host during the COVID-19 pandemic. Virtual sessions presented by institutions, vendors. Registration is going to be free. If you would like to submit a proposal, again, you can use that QR code to submit a proposal. I think we're limiting live like seats in StreamYard to 250, but you can always, if we sell out faster than you can register, you can watch the live stream on YouTube. But please do join our community, hop on stage with us while we're going through those sessions.
Yeah, I love the fact that you know kind of announced it. So that's great. So, and for the folks that have been in the Beehive, they've been to some of our summits. It's very dynamic. It's very interactive. We do it in a model that allows for people to engage throughout the day. You know, it starts around, I think it's 11 Eastern, and it runs till about 4. And it's a really just interactive conversation with a variety of your peers. And that's why we think it's a learning element for us. It's the ability for us to collaborate. We believe the community is stronger when we're doing that. So we're excited. So as David said, we'd love for you all to be a part of that conversation with us. And definitely, just look at the content around the conference. Either let David or I know if you're interested in it. David's going to be giving out a set of tracks. And inside of those tracks, there's topics that we're going to be looking for. And if you think we're missing a topic, let us know. It's very dynamic in the way that we're going to work on it. So, but yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to talk about that, David.
Yeah, really excited. There's so much work being done in the Slate community, like I said, by institutions, by other vendors, that being able to see and get a kind of a peek under the hood to understand what people are doing, how that could apply to your institution. And I think being able to do it in a virtual setting, again, is so empowering to the institutions. You don't have to fly to a city to get a very, very tightly scheduled session. I love Slate Summit every year. It's always so amazing, but not everyone can come to those. And being able to have that virtual session, I think, will be really helpful.
And I think the community is just going to get stronger and stronger, right? I think part of what we're trying to do is to empower you to use the strategies that you need to serve the students that you have in your community in the way that who will be successful there. So we're hoping you're seeing that as we go through this process. Join us for many of the Hive conversations. This in August. This is the last for July. In August, we have on August 7th, we have a 5 things a good leader needs to bring to the table. There's a whole conversation. As David said, we have 2 office hours on the 14th and the 21st. On the 28th, we're having a conversation about why does higher ed struggle to change? And we're bringing a really thought leader, Greg Sattel, into the room and to have that conversation. And then we come back and David on the 28th will go back into a strategic guide for predictive modeling in Slate. So we got a full slate of programming, and we're just going to start adding more and more. And any of you that want to get involved in being a part of it, being able to present, being able to be collaborative, we're really open to any of that. So David, I want to say thank you for driving this conversation. I want to say thank you to the audience for being here and being a part of the community. We hope you're enjoying it and that you will share it out to others, and we'll take it from there. Any last words, David?
No, yeah, that QR code, if you do want to watch the recordings of previous sessions, grab the waitlist for future sessions, please use that QR code or to grab a seat in the virtual Slate Summit. More information to come, of course, but really excited about the community that's building around these. And I hope to see everyone several times in August.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon. And we're hoping you'll be in the Beehive again. We'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.